Hi everyone, Nick Weber with Archer here for another Direct Connect, joined today by Bryan Carr and Steve Parker, two of our other managing partners at Archer. Brian, Steve, how you guys doing?
I'm doing well,
Outstanding.
thank you.
I don't believe either one of you. I'm doing great.
All right.
Um,
Makes me believe that, right?
because we're going to talk about all kinds of different compliance programs, and everybody has their own regime they want to throw in there. So that's always a fun, really exciting, puts a smile on everyone's face. Kind of want to start off with what are we normally seeing from the folks we work with in the critical infrastructure space on compliance? Ideally, it's all build security for security's sake and doing the right thing, but not the case anymore. So what's your favorite? Let's start with that. What's your favorite compliance regime of all the ones you've worked with yet?
Ooh,
That word favorite and compliance, I don't know
favorite.
if those two belong together. That's a bit of a
Which one
stretch.
makes you pull your hair out least? Brian, your beard?
Well, I'm done with that. So, I don't know. I don't know if for me any of them rise to the top, say cream of the crop, whatever metaphor we want to use. Obviously there's lots of masters to be served, right? Whether it's at the federal or state level, even municipal level. There's so many different. Like you said, everybody wants to throw their own flavor to it. And how to protect, critical facilities or critical systems. That's actually a really hard question to answer. I don't know if Steve has a better answer than I do, but I
No,
don't
that
know.
was I was hoping you'd answer that one for me, and I could just kind of lurk in the background here. Um, I
Sorry.
don't I don't know.
Steve loves
I don't
all
know
of
if
his
I can
children
point to
equally.
Yes.
Oh, I,
That's, yeah,
I, I do totally. They're all different, but I love them all the same. But no, I mean, you kind of let off, Nick, to your point on lots of different masters, lots of different compliance regimes out there and all that sort of thing. I can't point to a single program that I've seen that I would say, hey, this one's really a cut above the rest. But as a general attitude or general approach, and I think we'll talk more about this on the discussion today. But how do you build a program that can meet any and all compliance? That overarching program that you can then map down to all the sub requirements that you're going to get, different regulators and such. And there seems to be kind of an emergence of that thought process. I don't know if anyone's nailed it yet, but that thought process of we can't do these all as one-offs. We need that comprehensive overall program.
yeah, and then sprinkle in the flavor of the day, right? I mean, there's whatever your executive goes and attends a conference is always a great example. Nick always gives, and go attend some conference and there's a bunch of FUD from one of the speeches or whatever, and they come back like, oh my gosh, we have to do this and this and this. And so not only do you have to try and manage these various aspects, but then you get just wild things thrown in there where somebody has this crazy idea or, oh, we really need to do this, and it's not exactly in line with what's going on. So
Yeah, blockchain. Or no, wait, that was
yeah,
2 years ago.
yeah,
Was it zero trust? Is that still a thing, or are we? Have
yeah,
we
zero
moved?
trust. Yeah,
Now
still
it's
a thing.
is it artificial intelligence, or do
Right.
you do you trust the AI, or do you give zero trust to the AI? I don't know.
Skynet.
Micro segmented zero trust AI to implement blockchain or something.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So we
Yeah,
didn't
that was
answer the
always
question, Nick. I mean,
always fun. No, that was
honestly,
that
we
was
don't
a
have the
good
answer.
dodge there. You guys are all set. You're ready for DC now. So just to step back and say, okay, what do we see out there in the infrastructure space? So we say of NERC that we're all intimately familiar or Stockholm syndrome with, FERC dams safety, which we see growing,
Yep.
TSA pipeline, which is still kind of in the fact finding, but we know it's going to eventually turn into a fully enforced regime. The CFATs, the Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards, that's been around for 15 years now, 20. It's been around for a while. Then you get into some of the SOX, GDPR if you're doing stuff
Yeah.
internationally, um, PCI. There's just so many things we start getting into privacy that are security related. Um, that's another piece is where do you draw this chalk line between what's security and what's something else? What are the other ones you're seeing out there? I've heard some rumblings about TSA Rail. I haven't been exposed to it yet, but
Yeah, I mean, on the state level, there's, I think there were several that have taken some steps, and California being probably top of that list a couple of years back. They've put in some measures and some requirements that aren't terrible. But just I guess from my just recent experience, just in working with a client right now with dam safety and kind of going through some of that the cyber side of dam safety is kind of interesting. It mirrors or draws a lot from SIP. A lot of the requirements or questions they ask and things like that are very, very in line with the SIP standards. The physical side of it obviously is pretty involved. Much more towards the SIP 14 approach in some aspects with the security plans and that. So that one I see more emphasis on that in the coming years. The TSA rail you mentioned, yeah, I saw. I don't remember the article, but there was some mention of, and maybe it was just foreshadowing or trying to predict what may be coming. But I think water is another big one that's going to come down the pipeline. Can I say that? Yeah. So, we can see some additional water regulations. Again, is that? Yeah. Okay. Is that at the the state or federal level? I think we're going to see a lot more states stepping in because the federal side may be moving too slow. Or doesn't understand their state and their situation. So I can see a lot of that on the state side.
Yeah, I'll jump in on the states. There's a lot of activity going on right now within various states. Interestingly, the federal government is pushing the states to regulate critical infrastructure in particular. We saw that as part of the national cybersecurity strategy that came out of the White House earlier this year. In our sector, particularly in the electric subsector, states are interesting because some utilities operate in multiple states. And so you're likely going to have a situation where you have differing requirements for the same business operating unit across state lines. Whereas, with NERC and TSA and water, you can have different operating areas that have different regulators and different requirements, and that's one thing. But to have different requirements on essentially the same infrastructure, just because you've crossed a a geographic jurisdictional boundary, that makes things interesting as well. So that the states, it's a place to watch, right? There's a lot going on right there, and a lot of different approaches being taken.
Well, not to get too policy wonk on you, Steve, there, but do you think there's a chance you see the feds make a push for that distribution infrastructure under the guise of interstate commerce rather than looking at the state? Do you see the utilities maybe pushing for it?
And anything is possible. I think it's unlikely because that boundary of jurisdiction between the states, particularly on the power grid, the states and the feds has been very, very strong. And there's been a lot of resistance to test the boundaries, so to speak. We're seeing some of that with DER. DER blurs the line between distribution and the bulk transmission. You can have not far from my house, there's I think it's about a 12 megawatt or maybe a 5 megawatt solar array, which is connected into essentially the distribution system, sub transmission system perhaps, which presumably would be a state jurisdiction. But in the aggregate, those things roll up and they can affect the bulk electric system, which brings in potential FERC jurisdiction. So there's that. There's also an effort. It's public knowledge, but it's not. The details aren't public. I don't believe. But there's an effort going on right now with NARUC, which is the trade association for the state regulators, in conjunction with the Department of Energy, to build out some sort of a model or a framework for state regulation. It would be a guidance document for the states to follow. That's in process right now. So the goal there is to bring some consistency, but states being what they are, you're never going to have perfect consistency. Might have some things that are similar, but every state's going to be a little bit different. They're going to have different priorities, different approaches, different biases in how they want to approach things. So I don't think we'll get to a point where we have perfect consistency across the states. The feds will probably not take over, but they will probably push to try to bring some measure of consistency, even though it will never be perfect.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'd look at if I were at one of these IOUs, investor-owned utilities particularly, that span multiple states. I look at mine in particular. serves three different states that are very different when it comes to regulation. One that has never met a regulation it didn't love, another that opposes any regulation whatsoever, and then one that's kind of in the middle. Trying to manage through that would just be a nightmare, I feel like. And then I feel like that's fairly common, at least in the WEC footprint, just the way the states, and politically the way things are these days, where there's just a hard line once you get off the coastal states to the next ones in the Mountain West. And so many of those utilities span that bound. That would be nice to have something at the federal level. Kind of interesting to see EPA shifted over the water one getting involved in the security regulation. That one shocked me. I knew they were always involved in water with some of the water purity and water safety things. Sounds like they've really kind of taken up what I think was kind of an ask from AWWA, which is one of the water trade associations, to please regulate them. One of the things when I was at Homeland Security was everybody looked at, energy has the money because they're regulated. So they have a mandate to go charge more. How much is your water bill versus your power bill? Or water gets pennies compared to dollars for energy and security. So I think that was an interesting one to see EPA jump in. Hopefully they're a little bit less heavy-handed than they were, at least early on, with some of this purity components. I remember doing a security assessment out of the Portland Water Bureau back when I was at Homeland Security, and they actually had to make the water less pure to meet the APA standards than when it came off of Mount Hood. So hopefully their security doesn't follow the same route where they make it less secure in the name of security. Wouldn't be the first time.
You should unlock that door to meet our standards, right? Yeah, I think that I agree with you on the EPA one. That was interesting, and I can't help but wonder if there's some angle there with the water group that they were a known quantity to them, as opposed to having somebody else who had no experience or familiarity with water, coming in and trying to regulate, whether it was DHS or anybody else. Maybe they're like, hey, let's pick these guys because we know them and we've worked with them for years. But that again just introduces another layer, potentially complexity. We have obviously a lot of clients, a lot of utilities around the country that also have their own water utility as well under that same umbrella. So there's another layer of potential complexity with a completely different regulatory body that a lot of these municipalities now have to layer over their current program.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I think it is kind of the devil they went with on that, rather than trying to train somebody what water is. Steve, what other ones are you seeing that are coming out that might be kind of a surprise there?
Going back to the federal level, obviously, we've seen TSA making moves, and you just mentioned EPA, so some of the regulatory agencies are moving into their sectors. There's the overarching performance goals that DHS has put out or CES has put out, and those are getting play in a lot of areas. So if you want to know the kinds of things that might get asked or required of you, looking at those performance goals, I think would be a good place to look at. Reporting. We're hearing, I think some of the legislation around reporting is getting moved through Congress. And so, mandatory reporting of events, whatever, or incidents, whatever those may be, however they're defined or whatever the thresholds may be. I think we're going to see that as well. And, they're, being a little forward looking, supply chain is obviously a big topic. I wouldn't be shocked to see some attempt to put some sort of regulations on the supply chain. I think it'll be challenging legally to do that, but I think there's probably a desire to put some sort of controls on what is going into critical infrastructure. I don't know how that'll be done, but I think there'll be a desire in an effort to do that.
Curious to see if they'll do kind of what FERC and DHS and DOE really pushed 10, 15 years ago to try to re-onshore some of the manufacturing back when they did the transformers and try to get more of the transformers built in the U.S. again. If they'll do something similar with a lot of those components. It can be done. It just, you pay for it.
Yeah, everything can be done. It's at what cost, right? And
exactly.
Will the market bear that, or will the customer bear that?
So with all these different regulations, and we've covered a whole bunch, and I'm sure there's a dozen more we couldn't even comprehend right now that'll be here next week. For the folks we work with every day who are trying to manage all of this day in and day out and meet their internal stakeholder needs, how do you build for that? Is it possible, or is that just another thing to throw onto the bingo card of blockchain, AI, et cetera, et cetera? Do you just keep playing whack-a-mole? Can you use risk? Do you try to just build a good security program? Any thoughts on how to build for that without going nuts?
I'll go first. I think foundationally, foundationally trying to build that security program. Every utility's different, special, whatever you want to say. To some degree. As we talked about, some of the bigger IOUs and that span multiple states, so there's some uniqueness there. But I think you've got to build kind of that core fundamental security program. Is it possible to manage all of them in one, with one broad brush? I don't think so. Unfortunately, I think even from a documentation standpoint, from a reporting standpoint, there's so many different ways that each of these regulations and regulatory bodies want things that I just don't see it possible. So to stay away from maybe the whack-a-mole side of things, I mean, there's got to be, at least internal to your organization, something, that's governing all of those, or attempting to kind of wrangle those and be an umbrella to all the regulations. But yeah, it's not a cookie cutter. It's not just stamp and repeat across any of those. They're all unique. They all have their own unique requirements and reporting. So trying to have that holistic view, of it, and understand what are those differences. I think that's probably the best you can do. But unfortunately, there's still going to be that whack-a-mole approach, which is, again, very resource intensive. You never know what's coming down the pipe. You never know, what curveballs come around and say, oh wow, we're focusing in this area, and now we've got to shift and focus in another area. Maybe that's one of the big messages then, is being able to shift and pivot if you need to. I know a lot of compliance programs are very deeply rooted, like, this is how we do it. It's the only way we do it. We're never doing it any different because this has worked. I don't know that approach is going to be effective going forward. You're going to need to be able to, pivot and adjust, and, kind of make those calls. I won't say on the fly, but they're going to come much more rapidly. Regulation's been very slow, but I think we're going to start seeing a lot more things moving. It's going to require you to also have to move much more quickly.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Brian that you're not going to be able to do a one size fits all sort of approach. But I will temper that a little bit and counter him perhaps a bit. I think the programmatic elements, I think, can to a large degree be commonized, caramelized like onions. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, now you're making me hungry.
And I think you need to. You can't have a standalone one-off compliance program for every regulation that is out there. So those, the oversight, the way you approach oversight, the way you approach the procedural, the governance aspects of it, I think that can be largely one size fits all. Where you're going to get differentiation and where you're going to have challenges is in mapping your higher level, controls and processes, procedures down to the specific requirements. Some of the things to consider, scope is going to be different. NERC-CIP has some very specific scope, and there's certain things that apply to NERC-CIP that you really can't generalize. Asset identification being one of them, right? The very specific definitions, very specific types of assets and facilities that cannot be applied broadly across an organization. Technical details, just looking between TSA and NERC on a common thing such as patching. NERC has some very specific timelines. TSA allows more of a risk-based approach. And so there's going to be differences there. Can you get to a common denominator or a high watermark on those? In some cases, perhaps. In other cases, you're going to have some things that vary. So you have to look at that. Just the general depth, breadth, nature of requirements. Some are programmatic. Some are very detailed at the technical level. So I think you got to look at each one individually. Look for areas where you can come up to that high watermark or a common denominator. And do the same thing across the enterprise, but acknowledge that there's going to be some that you have to, say, hey, this is a one-off for this area, for this device, for this program, for this process, for this operating unit, and then have that common area to map them back up to a centralized governance and oversight.
I think that's the key you just hit on there, Steve. It's trying to map what you've already got to what you have to do. I think that's the thing I see so many compliance groups maybe miss on that, because they jump right into what they think needs to be done rather than stepping back and doing a true gap analysis. What do we have versus what do we really need to do, not what do we think we need to do. And that's where it's helpful sometimes to get that outside perspective, whether it's a peer share or hiring an external resource to kind of ground truth and challenge some of your assumptions that you live every day. But I think if you can really break that down and focus your different security teams, whether it's cyber, physical, personnel, information, privacy, you name it, let them focus on what they do and make sure they understand what deliverables you need for each different compliance requirement or regime and build their security around that. I think that's going to be as close as you're going to get to that one ring to rule them all. Any closing thoughts around the horn there? Enjoy your summer break and try to leave your cell phone at home. I know when I was at Grant, I always tried to go somewhere with no cell coverage. I won't tell you where I'd go, but
Yeah,
up in the remote
definitely. I
mountains
mean,
of North Idaho.
I know a guy up there.
Everybody's
Yeah,
hiding.
I think, it's a constant, I won't say battle, but there's, to your point, Nick, about just getting away for a little bit, making sure that you take the time that you need for yourself, because it really, in the compliance world and the security world, it can be all consuming, right? And I think we've all been there, at various times in various positions in our careers, and it can be all consuming. So don't forget to pause and take a few minutes for yourself and ask for help. I mean, honestly, that's the biggest thing is, internally I've been in organizations that just continually argue about certain things, or there's no progress, or there's just nothing actually moving. They're not moving that needle. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Again, whether it's a peer share, whether it's, independent third parties, whatever you bring in, but somebody to kind of get you off of that group think or that stalemate, whatever it is. That would be my biggest piece of advice, because can't tell you how many times we've stepped into an organization, in our capacity, and settled some long-standing 3-year argument that they've been having, where there was this disagreement, and they're like, oh, well, thanks, yeah, that just cleared it up. We've been, struggling internally for 3 years about this particular topic and making a call, and sometimes it is that easy. It's not always that way, but
You're still
yeah,
something of a
ask for help.
legend at my last employer there. During the audit, when everybody was arguing about what the data request meant for half a day, and you stepped in, and go, no, it's this. It's a 2-minute answer. So the legend
Read
of
between the lines a little bit.
this, they spoke in hushed terms of Bryan Carr and Paul Bunyan, one and the same.
I don't know if that's legend status, but it was it worked out. It worked out. Reading between the lines a little bit. Steve, you got any parting thoughts?
I'll just say, I'll kind of mirror your comments a little bit, Brian, about not getting too worked up about this. I would say, pursue perfection, but don't expect perfection. I think you have to really focus on continuous improvement. Keep moving that bar, so to speak, moving the line forward, continuous improvement, and understand and recognize that you're never going to be perfect as an organization. And I think that some of the regulators are starting to understand that, and they're kind of building in that concept into the standards that hey, you can have a glitch here and there. We want to make sure we catch it and we fix it and correct it, but not necessarily expecting perfection at all times out of the box. So give yourself a little slack. Understand that you're going to have some glitches. Just keep trying to get better. Enjoy the summer. There are no compliance emergencies. I think I can say that. Some people may disagree, but no compliance emergencies. So take care of yourself. Enjoy the summer, and come back in the fall and refreshed, renewed, and be prepared to move forward and get better.
One last bonus question for each of you. Where is the next place people are going to be able to catch you out in the public, out in the wild? What's the next event you're headed to? Brian, Doe show's over, so what is it?
Yeah, well, it would have been the Doe Show, but may make an appearance at Energy Sec Conference. Still trying to figure that one out. If not, it'd be San Diego in the fall for the WEC conference. That might be the next one we'll make an appearance at. Who knows? There might be something in between, but those are the next two coming on mind right now.
How about you, Steve? Obviously Energy Sec, but
Yeah, I'm enjoying as much time this summer at home, working on the garden and other household projects. My next travel will actually be the Energy Sec Summit, so I'll be down in Disneyland, Anaheim, California, July 17th through 19th. Hope to see you all there.
I'll be at Energy Sec and then also at GSX down in Dallas with ASIS in September. And after that, everywhere. All right. Well, thanks for
Kind
joining,
of
guys.
ramps
It's
up
been
after.
another Yeah, it does. It hit the fall circuit. So, all right. Well, take care, everyone. It's been another good Direct Connect. Hope you enjoyed. If you need anything, don't be afraid to reach out. Take care. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
See you later.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Stay up to date on all the videos we release here at Archer by clicking on the subscribe button. Click on the bell to be notified right away when we release new videos. If you know of a topic or someone you think we should talk to on Direct Connect, please let us know in the comments below.